Hey yo, kings and queens, it's your boy Chuck, and I decided it was time to give you guys some more SCP content because it's probably been like 10 years or something. The SCP Foundation is one of my favorite franchises due to it being full of mystery, information, and massive world building. But we're not really here for that. What we're concerned with here today is which SCPs seem to possess the most power, durability, or overall potential for destruction. With entries numbering in the thousands, it is fair to say that the SCP Foundation has no shortage of candidates, but I couldn't possibly include all of them, otherwise we'll probably be here for like 3 hours. So, I decided to read over each series, document the big bads, and read over their tales and feats to provide a composite overview. In this video, I will be going over Series 1, which includes SCP-1 through 999. I will eventually go over every series, so if you want to see more SCP content, you're like a fan of that, then, you should probably subscribe. Before we begin, here are the rules though. No biohazard or virus type SCP since we're already dealing with that shiz anyways. There will be no gods, high tier reality warpers, or higher dimensional entities that are unbound or not limited by outside means. So that means SCP-343, 239, and the vast majority of SCP-1 proposals like with the Broken God or the Scarlet King will not be included in this list. I will just cover the gods in a separate video instead. I want to make something clear as well, just because an SCP is more durable, has more raw power, or has a higher classification, doesn't automatically mean that, oh, they're more powerful than another SCP on the list. The rating will also depend on its activation requirements, its potential threat level, and its rate and range of destruction. So without further ado, let's jump in to see which are the strongest, most powerful SCPs within the OG series. If you've ever heard of the SCP Foundation, you might already know about the basics of it, but to give you a quick too long didn't read, it is a totally legit 110% real organization with a task to, well, secure, contain, and protect anomalous objects and beings to protect humanity, and in some cases, the stability of the universe and reality as we know it. There are several object classes, but the main three are as follows: Safe, Euclid, and Keter. It's pretty much clickbait, but safe doesn't automatically mean that the SCP is a goody two-shoes that won't kill a thing. It just means that it is either well understood or doesn't require an annoying amount of procedures to keep it contained. Euclids are not as well understood and pose more difficulty with their containment, but they can still pose a threat to mankind. Not all Keter class SCPs are dangerous, but in some cases they can bring about the apocalypse, but are generally hard if not impossible to contain and understand. To start off our list, why not make a splash with the first kaiju to be introduced into the SCP verse, SCP-169, also known as the Leviathan. SCP-169 is a massive, spacefaring arthropod-like species that can serve as life pods or gods of creation within the universe. The Leviathan species can vary in shape, size, diet, and culture, but their longevity is impressive as they're able to live for millions to billions of years. They spend most of their time traveling throughout space to eventually touch down on a planet that they deem worthy to deliver their precious cargo of breathable air, vegetation, Doritos, and life-sprouting seeds. Curiously enough, Levi might be the reason as to why there is life on Earth, as it is thought to have been around since the Precambrian era. Estimated to being thousands of kilometers long, Levi is a big boy, and it makes sense since it supports a cluster of islands, which seemed anomalous to the SCP Foundation when they noticed the islands moved. SCP-169 is the origin for the multitude of stories over the centuries regarding a gigantic sea creature, and is also behind the infamous bloop sound. Here, listen to it. The worldwide governments have tried to suppress this knowledge and say that the bloop is just a cracking iceberg, but come on guys, it's obviously 169, wake up. The SCP Foundation is real. In the seas of the Earth, SCP-169 is extremely slow moving and seems to be in its dying stages of life, causing tremors every few months due to its slow breathing. But what makes the Leviathan so impressive is their godly level of speed and durability that they possess in their earlier stages of life. Its species is able to move several times faster than light, as it is able to cover many points of light in mere minutes. It has even endured the heat and flames from numerous kinds of supernovas, from red giants to blue hypergiants and white dwarfs. I have 169 on here because of its incredible capabilities in its prime, but due to it mostly being peaceful and, well, dying, aren't we all, it doesn't really pose a huge threat to mankind. However, due to the hardiness of it as a species, it is potentially dangerous. I mean, think about it, you have a kaiju species that can travel faster than light and endure supernovas. I think it's fair to say that a malevolent, much stronger one could certainly have its way with the planet if it so wanted, or at least do mad damage to it. Second on the list is the Keter class SCP-076-2, an ancient olive-skinned human that reforms within its black coffin, 76-1. 76-2 is known by many names such as Abel, Havel, Ablashal, and the Butcher. Revealed to be the son of Adam with a warrior spirit, he became a champion within a valley of biblical proportions when he protected his people from monsters and demons, until he was eventually killed by his brother Cain due to jealousy. In turn, his death corrupted him into a bloodthirsty maniac, and in the earthly dimension, he has proven to be a hardy SOB. Abel is classified as a type black humanoid, simply put, a demigod, due to his speed, durability, strength, and impressive fighting record. Being thousands of years old, he is greatly skilled in martial arts and knows his way around blades and other weaponry, which he can create at will, seemingly unlimitedly, through reaching into his pocket dimension. One of his best blades has allowed him to cut through tanks with ease, and he's even developed a samurai-type blade that helped him deflect heavy machine gun rounds and is capable of performing thousands of rotations per minute. So I think it's fair to say that his combat speed and reaction time is at least supersonic. Like Chuck Norris, he can casually pry apart metal slabs that weigh several tons and can run about as fast as a cheetah, which can reach over 55 miles per hour. Still not as fast as Keemstar though. At one point, the SCP Foundation was like, you know what, this guy's actually really good at killing stuff, we should use him. So they made him the leader of the mobile task force called Pandora's Box. But this was eventually nullified because Abel is really like crazy. He's broken out of containment numerous times and is seen as such a huge threat that a nuclear warhead had to be detonated to take him out. Although Abel is pretty resistant, he can still die, and once he does, he eventually reforms within 076-1. Abel has feats proving him to be comparable if not stronger than other humanoid SCPs such as 96 and 106 due to his numerous battles with other SCPs such as 6A2, whom we will discuss more in depth later on. 6A2 is the crocodile-like doomsday of the SCP-verse that can adapt to virtually anything and cannot really die. Gary Stu. Abel sees it as his biggest rival due to him also being an agent of destruction. In 1883, within one iteration, Abel fought 6A2 for over an hour, both causing heavy injury to each other, and even without an arm and missing half a leg, Abel couldn't give less of a shit, and he even made weapons out of his own organs in attempts to slay the dragon. Prior to their battle, 6A2 had managed to wipe out numerous towns and villages, and was stated as being so durable that the Royal Navy could do little to stop it. At the time, the United Kingdom's navy was the largest and strongest in the world, so Abel fared far better than an entire legion of battleships could have. 76-2 has even managed to slice 6A2 in half, something that is extremely hard to do due to 6A2's regeneration. Unfortunately, he's either stalemated 6A2 or lost to him outright, but he's at least comparable enough to contend with him in combat. Granted, Abel might not be as durable as SCP-96, for example, whose skeletal structure is so dense that SCP-173, the statue, had to try snapping it for hours on end. But his thousands of years of combat experience, rage, and ability to study and replicate fighting styles should grant him superiority over many other SCP humanoids. Abel's earthly form is quite impressive, however, 76-2 is a mere shadow of Ablashal's true power within the realm of gods. But that is a video for another time. Oh man, some of you are going to be caught off guard by this, but an SCP that I believe to be more dangerous than these two is unironically a safely designated lighter. Yes, a lighter. SCP-403 is a seemingly ordinary lighter with a catch. It exponentially increases its explosive reaction if it's lit several times in a short period of time. Even though it has no fuel source, it has released superheated gas, plasma, and even star matter. A fourth consecutive ignition was so powerful that it was comparable to a 10 megaton bomb explosion. And to get even stranger still, the massive power released from the lighter fails to harm itself or the user due to a magnetic field that it emanates. So it should theoretically be able to endure even more powerful explosions. It's been determined that a fifth consecutive ignition has the potential not only to devastate large parts of a continent, but it could also result in an event comparable to data expunged. My best guess is that it probably wipes out the concept of anime itself, which honestly wouldn't be a bad thing. That's like an absolute win. The way I see it, I don't know. In the wrong hands, SCP-403 could certainly tear up Europe or North America and could destabilize many SCP sites in the process. If its magnetic field can withstand any level of destruction it can create, it is possible that with further ignitions, SCP-403 could destroy planets and maybe even stars. However, due to it being well understood and safely contained in a safe with the surveillance of armed guards at all times, it doesn't pose a direct threat, at least for now. Next on the list is the OG, the one who started it all, SCP-173, the neck snapping statue. There was no doubt that I'd include the Peanut Boy in Series 1. SCP-173 is a sentient concrete and rebar-based statue that can typically be contained and kept inert as long as eye contact is made with it at all times. And its cell must continuously be cleaned due to the reddish-brown substance it releases. Yes, it is contained, but just because it is contained and made of concrete doesn't mean that it is not powerful. It is unknown as to who or what made SCP-173, but it has ties with the artistic group of interest called Are We Cool Yet? It's been known by many names like the Wandering Boy, a High Golem, the Sightless Demon, and in its true form, the Keter. It has even been implied to have been born as a result of Abel's fight with Cain long ago. For some reason, 173 wants humans to see it and it seeks them out because it feels appreciated to be looked at, but insulted if one looks away. Its ludicrous speed that allows it to be faster than a blink is very strange because it doesn't seem to truly move, but glide or teleport. One story describes 173 as follows. It never actually moved, and neither did he. It was more akin to a calculation. If this is my speed and that is where I'm heading, that is where I will end up. Then his body would simply reappear where it was supposed to be, circumventing the rule of inertia. 173 has also been said to have Hume differentials. Now, what the hell is a Hume? What does that mean? In the SCP verse, Humes are basically units of measurement used to determine the strength and range of reality in a general area, in an object or entity that showcases reality warping, or that has a different quote-unquote reality level in its surrounding universe. Going by this, I think it is likely to say that 173 exhibits some type of reality warping or teleportation with its movement. The statue moves at an average rate of 20 meters per second, but it's been capable of moving and killing someone far faster than that. It was able to snap the neck of someone 10 centimeters away from him in 100,000th of a second, which would grant him the crazy high hypersonic speeds of 10,000 meters per second. And this speed is even greater when it is unbound by eye contact, so it is very clear one of the fastest beings that the Foundation has in containment. If you remember SCP-96, he is basically this really disproportionate humanoid who goes apeshit whenever someone looks at him. The Shy Guy has withstood acid, fire, radiation, thousands of helicopter gunner rounds, bunch of hit markers, tank-busting rockets, and even acid from SCP-682 without structural damage to its skeleton. Yet, SCP-173 was the only one who managed to split its spine, and in turn, this helped the Foundation kill SCP-96 in one iteration. SCP-106, the old man who can phase through solid objects, corrode what it touches, and take its prey to its own pocket dimension, also faced off against 173 with little results. 106's phasing and corrosion was resisted and somewhat countered by the concrete, and of course, his neck and bones were snapped whenever he looked away. Even after battling for months on end, 173 wasn't tired at all. When he fought 682, the statue made it so scared that it had to grow armored sets of eyes to keep it from attacking him despite their size difference. 173 is likely one of the very few beings that 682 fears because in its true form, beyond the mortal concepts of time and space, 173 basically killed 1/3 of 682's comrades. SCP-173 has also been able to multiply and make smaller versions of itself. In one iteration, when it rapidly multiplied, each clone being as strong as the original, 173 brought upon an XK class end-of-the-world scenario as it destroyed numerous sites, killed millions of people, and at one point 150 of them basically did the impossible, ganged up on 682 and managed to tear it apart and possibly kill it. They were eventually all defeated by nuclear warheads, but the Earth would have never been the same after that. Although it is not consistently brought up in its lore, the stranger part of 173 is that it likely has some sort of mental block or limitation set upon by its creator or creators. There have been a couple of stories that imply this. For example, the creator said in one story, "Well, just this one time, if even one of them is disrespectful enough to look away, you may do as you wish, even if the others are still looking." Another tale mentioned that when SCP-173 was unlimited by eye contact, it ran through oceans, deserts, and through continents in mere minutes, granting it even higher level hypersonic levels of speed. Through its block being removed, it had its way with the planet and killed virtually every human being in every building, room, city, or any semblance of civilization on the planet. I'll admit, 173 is not seen as extremely dangerous going by its usual portrayal and limitations, but its composite abilities and feats help it redefine terror. Think about it, if just one unbound SCP-173 was able to kill off everything on Earth, just imagine what would happen when it multiplies on top of that. Oh yeah, not to mention that it can also hack into technology and make it useless, so yeah, there's that too. Next, we got SCP-94, a Keter class 1.6 meter black immovable sphere located in Argentina that is held, it's really not, in a cube. Due to its black hole type properties, it can basically extinguish whatever goes into it, including light. The catch though is that it does not pull in things towards it like an actual black hole would do, otherwise it would have more than likely sucked up the Earth a long time ago. The sketch thing about it is that it gets bigger over time, its usual rate being a few millimeters per month, which doesn't sound like much, but it does double in diameter and height every 31 years. Within the end of the 27th century, it is projected to become as large as the Earth itself and consume it entirely. Now, obviously, SCP-94 is not an actual black hole, but due to its similarities, I decided to use a real black hole as a model to estimate how much mass SCP-94 could have, cause why not? The volume of the Earth is about 1 trillion cubic kilometers, while its radius is 6,371 kilometers. If you've watched my Totally Awesome Godzilla videos, which if you haven't, you should totally check them out, you might recall that a black hole with the mass of the Earth has an event horizon with a 9mm radius. We can use this Schwarzschild radius to determine the mass of the black hole as it is proportional to it. The radius of the Earth is approximately 708 million times larger than that, so going off just the radius, SCP-94 would already have the mass of over 2,100 suns. The mass is pretty overwhelming, clocking in at over 4.2 decillion kilograms. Because space-time works differently within the event horizon of a black hole, the closest that one gets to the singularity, the innermost portion of the black hole, the volume is compressed so much that it is heavily reduced and eventually becomes zero, while the density reaches infinity. Due to 94 being so like and unlike a black hole, we can't really gauge how much volume it has, but I think it is fair to assume that an Earth-size SCP-94 would contain the mass of hundreds of thousands if not millions of stellar masses at least. SCP-094 was hard for me to place because even though it won't pose a threat for centuries and is quote-unquote contained for now, its potential for destruction is immense despite its slow expansion. Since the Earth will be consumed, it means that the Foundation has no way to prevent its spread and will be forced to evacuate to other planets. It would likely take centuries for it to reach Mars and other planets, but given enough time, it would probably be able to eat the entire solar system. SCP-225 is by far one of the strangest SCPs within Series 1. Although it is classified as in Euclid, its bizarre behavior and threat to the Earth can instantly grant it Keter status. SCP-225 is composed of 2 immovable, indestructible metallic spheres theorized to not come from the Earth. 225-1 follows the path of the Earth's rotation, but for some reason it is unaffected by magnetism, gravity, inertia, and other tested forces. SCP-225-2, however, seems to rotate independently from both the Sun and the Earth. Seems pretty harmless, right? Well, yes, but not quite. The spheres by themselves are really no trouble, but what makes these really dangerous is that if they were to collide, it could cause nasty levels of destruction. Since both of these spheres are virtually indestructible, they could very easily release gigatons of energy at the very least, which could basically destroy entire countries. But to get even worse, the scenario of the Earth being cracked right down the middle or outright destroyed are also possible. To get even more spicy, the spheres likely represent a pair of connected yet slightly diverged universes that once they collide will try to occupy the same space at the same time, which could basically mean that both of these universes will collide and wipe each other out. Unfortunately, its true power is vague, but it is certainly something that has the potential to wipe out more than just the Earth. Next, we have an extra-dimensional SCP being SCP-435, a Keter-type SCP made up of 2 components. The first one is an iron meteorite that has to be illuminated with several lamps at all times. Said lamps and their generators must be constantly maintained to keep an extremely dangerous being at bay, that being 435-2. 435-2 is a higher dimensional, transparent, squid-like being with no mass or inertia and retracts light. Due to its nature, it is impossible for anything in the earthly dimension to affect it. Any physical object that comes into contact with it will have its properties reflected or inverted towards itself. If you've ever watched JoJo, I guess you could think of it similarly to one of the effects of the Stan Sea Moon, which due to its manipulation of gravity, he's able to basically punch people and objects inwards, which is something that you would not want to go through. Although typically inert, 435-2 becomes a Keter class threat when 435-1, the meteorite, is not kept illuminated properly. When 435-2 fails to be lit, it'll move at a high crazy velocity and quickly increase surrounding radiation levels by moving through large volumes of air, bodies of water, and land masses, which is gonna be extremely detrimental to the planet. In the 1950s, prior to the SCP Foundation acquiring the object, it was being kept watch by villagers who kept it lit with torches constantly. Unfortunately, once many of these torches ceased to illuminate, 435-2 was released and caused so much destruction that a cover story of a nuclear test had to be made to explain the aftermath. Due to how it reacts with lower dimensional objects, it casually destroyed large parts of the Earth, if not all of it entirely. You see, 435-2 is actually the avatar or the lower dimensional form of an SCP deity called He Who Made Dark, the brother of He Who Made Light. These two beings are responsible for all of the light and dark in the SCP multiverse and have a much deeper importance when we talk about the SCP gods in the future. As they were working on building a cosmos together, the Light Brother decided to just roast the shit out of his brother for some reason, I don't know. This pissed him off and obviously they fought each other. The altercation ended when the Light Brother managed to trap him into a rock or coffin-like structure, and in order for He Who Made Dark to be kept at bay, the Light Brother put the rock around the sun to keep it lit so that he could not find his way out. Unfortunately, this rock or meteor eventually crashed into the Earth sometime after and has been kept guard by humans ever since. Luckily, SCP-435-2's expansion can be stopped if, 435-1 receives adequate illumination. But if it's active for more than 90 seconds, it becomes virtually impossible to stop. Hell, even if 435-1 was teleported to another universe, 435-2 will stay in the same universe and likely be released if it does not exist in the same plane as the meteor. Going by how 435-2 works, not only would it be capable of destroying the Earth, but if it expands wildly, it is certainly capable of destroying the universe over time. It is the infinitesimally small shadow of a being beyond the Scarlet King, after all. Yes, it is extremely powerful, but the SCP Foundation has kept it at bay for decades and its release is fully dependent on us, so it doesn't seem to be as much of a threat for now. By far, one of the most powerful and famous SCPs in Series 1 is none other than He Who Had to Do It to Them, aka SCP-1, Dr. Clef's proposal. Designated as a Keter in Olympia class, SCP-1 is a giant archangel composed of otherworldly levels of energy that seems to be guarding a massive gate between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, in an area around ancient Mesopotamia that is likely tied to a massively important garden. He is most commonly referred to as Uriel, or the projection or avatar of Uriel, one of SCP-343's finest angel warriors. It has a multitude of wings and wields a massive blade with a temperature rivaling that of the sun, which can erase beings from existence. Even though his blade is at least millions of degrees Fahrenheit, it doesn't affect its surroundings for some reason. But if SCP-1 really wanted to, it could easily glass the Earth's surface or destroy it entirely. It can also manipulate minds and wipe memories with its go-to command, Forget. However, it is heavily tied not only to the creation of the SCP Foundation but to the founder himself, as Uriel commanded him with a simple word, Prepare. SCP-1 is virtually indestructible to us weakling humans, as the SCP Foundation quickly learned that they cannot move, damage, or control the Guardian. It can attack Multi seemingly omnidirectionally, as it destroyed 100 drones coming from different angles at the same time. Even Abel himself was scared shitless of SCP-1, as one of the experiments describes the following.
Experiment F. SCP-076 and Task Force Omega-7 instructed to approach SCP-1 on foot. Result: SCP-076 refuses to carry out mission, despite not being informed of the mission's nature. Upon being asked why, SCP-076 replies, "No, just no."
This is technically a spoiler for when I do Series 3 in the future, but SCP-1 in an alternate dimension faced off against a creamy green and white furred humanoid-faced deer known as SCP-2845. SCP-2845 is a godlike entity gifted with matter manipulation, which allows it to create metallic hydrogen and other unreasonable stuff, and basically transmutate whatever it wants to. Not only does it have the capability to wipe out all life on Earth, but it can casually destroy its containment site if it really wanted to. It is completely resistant to physical damage. You see, SCP-2845 came from a comet that quickly reached the Earth, and it was seen as such a huge threat that the Global Occult Coalition, which is basically one of the SCP's rivals, had to work with the Foundation and lock down everything in the area. The deer was attacked for days, and it was unimpeded by virtually everything the Foundation threw at it until it was led into its containment site. So imagine an army of AC-130s, artillery squads, tanks, chopper gunners, and even all of these proved futile to the Stag, which would also scale to SCP-1. Within SCP-1730, famously attributed to what happened to Site-13, SCP-1 fought against both the Stag and some black hentai monster or something. All three fought each other with fury and unrelenting violence. Although 2845 managed to encase SCP-1 with its matter manipulation, Uriel managed to break free and blasted multiple times, seemingly fighting it and the other monster on equal footing. I'd say the main reason as to why SCP-1 is one of the most powerful in Series 1 isn't just because of its nature and magnificent glowing weapon, but because any abnormal behavior it shows will get the SCP Foundation freaking out that the day of reckoning had finally come. Some of you might not be surprised at all, but next on the list is SCP-682, the unrelenting, undying, ever-adapting God of Destruction, who ironically enough is the very heart of each universe and has been around as long as creation itself. 682's designation is the hard-to-kill reptile for a reason, even though it's not a reptile and it is not alive or even a corporeal being as we know it. It can adapt to virtually anything the Foundation or other SCPs have thrown at it, and it can even absorb abilities, capable of using them to a greater extent than the source that it came from. It is not invincible, at least not normally. It can and has been knocked out and heavily damaged by common weaponry, but killing it is a whole different story. You could argue that it has a degree of a no-limits fallacy, but it seems to be able to adapt in comparison to the power used against it. However, it is not able to keep all of its adaptations forever and can lose them over time, but its body never stops changing and it has retained some immunities or at least higher levels of resistance, as I'll prove later on. It's been called by many names: Atanti Kulpinu, the Tarask, the Primal Destruction of Existence, Satan, there goes my monetization, the Serpent, a Dragon, Summer's Exile, and much more. Its exact origin has several interpretations. One is that he is the serpent from a garden with two of the most important structures in the SCP multiverse, the Tree of Knowledge and the Tree of Life. Formerly the protector of said trees, he decided to give humans the gift of knowledge, which made SCP-343 pretty mad, and in return, he decided to cut off his wings and cast 682 down into the earthly dimension, inside a body that is nigh impossible to kill. The reason he cannot die is, ironically enough, to suffer from the knowledge that he gave to mankind. My personal favorite interpretation is that he is a child of the fourth bride of the Scarlet King, for the story says that her offspring had an impenetrable hide, could heal their injuries, and feared no man, weapon, or spell. As much as I like the original entry, it makes no sense. It is somehow contained by hydrochloric acid, which wears down its regeneration, yet its very power would have allowed it to adapt and make the acid useless a long time ago. In my headcanon, there's two ways to explain this, is that either hydrochloric acid is anomalous and 682 cannot adapt to it, or the more sensible option, the author didn't expect 682 to become so damn overpowered. 682 can and has broken out of containment numerous times. However, due to him seeking out conversation or information from other SCPs, such as SCP-053, whom he serves as her noble steed as it is the Horseman of Death, this has seemingly lowered his rampage and bloodlust over the years, but no matter what, the Thing wants to get rid of all life. At first glance, 682 seems like a Mary Stu / Gary Stu kind of character, and honestly it kind of is, but that doesn't subtract from its ridiculous amount of feats. I cannot go over every single one of them, but you'll be surprised, I assure it. 682 is not bound to Earth's chemistry and can change its tissue from living to non-living at will. SCP-063, a toothbrush that can apparently destroy living and non-living material by making it cease to exist, was countered by 682 after he developed a new tissue. As I mentioned already, to prevent SCP-173 from snapping it further, 682 developed sets of armored eyes so that it could always watch 173 and at the same time protect itself from the SCP Foundation trying to shoot its eyes out. And no infographics, nukes wouldn't work on it, and neither do vacuums, as 682 can just emanate its own atmosphere. Localized reality warping, rewriting its history, and even banishing it to another dimension doesn't work either, at least not permanently. SCP-738-2, an entity who makes deals, was asked if he could destroy 682 while leaving the Earth, humanity, and the whole universe intact. The being replied with,
"Your Foundation couldn't afford it, and you personally definitely couldn't afford it."
One of its most infamous feats was when it was exposed to SCP-826's effects. SCP-826 is a bookend that can virtually make any setting or narrative take place in an enclosed space when a book is placed between it. A story was titled "The Generally Nice, Friendly Thing That Can and Will Kill 682 Permanently if it so much as spots that damn lizard." But after 682 was baited into the dimension where the story was taking place, he somehow survived and only came out with heavy injuries. After the incident, the recovered book not only had more pages, but also a different title, to "The Generally Nice, Friendly Thing That Tried to Kill SCP-682 Permanently, but Failed." So, it seems that SCP-682 can manipulate the plot on an even higher level than 826. In one iteration, SCP-682 pulled a Broly, grew large enough to eat the sun, and over time, it destroyed and ate every single galaxy in the universe until it became a void of nothingness, accomplishing its mission of wiping out all life in existence. He's also been implied to being able to absorb SCP-123, a black hole-like structure with the mass of our solar system. To be honest though, this is all weak sauce in comparison to the Series 4 SCPs that 682 was exposed to. SCP-3000 is a big-ass eel, who I won't go into depth on for now, but the creature is infamous for being able to dissolve a being's memories and consciousness. Its secretion, Y909, has been used to make amnestics, amnestics being used by the Foundation to suppress memories and vital information. So the solution seems simple: why not just make 682 forget how to regenerate or how its abilities work? Luckily, the compound did make 682 forget how to regenerate properly for a few hours, but it eventually reverted the effects. It didn't really matter anyways, because later on, higher amounts of the secretion in combination with other SCPs and other dangerous substances still didn't take it down, proving that 682 retains a degree of immunity or resistance to things it's encountered before. Well, what if we just threw 682 into non-existence? SCP-3930 was the candidate for such a task. SCP-3930 is a void without a dimension, shape, or form that doesn't exist, but can still somehow be perceived by people. Virtually anything existing that enters it will no longer exist, yet even after 682 was placed within it, somehow the damage to personnel or memories of a creature resembling 682 still existed. This is going to sound confusing as hell, but 682's ability will allow it to adapt to something that doesn't exist even though it itself doesn't exist anymore. What a mindfuck, right? The crazier thing is that it came back into full existence hours later. It's not explained how it did this, but my guess is that since 682 has been described to be the idea or a form of a lizard, it cannot be erased from existence by such simple means. I've explained this before, but the idea or form of something is basically the blueprint to whatever you can think of, like a table, a flower, or even a body pillow. This essence will then exist within our reality, but would not be limited by higher spatial and temporal dimensions, allowing it to appear in higher levels of existence. This is what we call a platonic concept or ideal. Okay, well what if we just write 682 out from the narrative, making it so it never existed? To test this out, SCP-3309 was used. SCP-3309 is a narrative-affecting SCP that makes cataloged items disappear due to said items or individuals lacking a cause and effect to their existence. Something weird happened though, because reality was shifted, and instead of 682 being removed, surprisingly, records of its existence and general appearance remained in the new reality. So basically 682 can counter narrative changing SCPs as well, to an extent. As I said at the start, SCP-682 is the heart of every universe, and there are things backing this up. For one, there is an entity resembling 682 in virtually every timeline, and albeit with a few exceptions, no timelines that have or lack life have been found that do not have 682 or some similar entity within it. So to put it simply, if there is no 682, there is no universe, for he is a constant. 682's rare deaths can be attributed to dozens of SCP-173 clones ripping it apart and to SCP-2935, an alternate reality where everything is dead. So either this reality was affected by a much stronger being than 682, nullifying its effects, or since it killed 682, all life ceased to exist then and there. Admittedly, 682 has been knocked out and damaged numerous times, but due to its connection to the universe, its incredible adaptation and power copying, I think it deserves second place at least. Yeah, SCP-1 is baseline more powerful and more durable, but SCP-682 still trash-talked SCP-1 until he was blasted away numerous times, despite the fact that SCP-1's sword can erase beings from existence. And look, I'll admit, I might be a little bit of an SCP-682 fanboy, maybe the biggest one in existence. No, but for real, I mean, take a look at the experiment log and tell me that he doesn't deserve to be top 3 at least. Before we get into number 1, I wanted to go over an honorable mention being SCP-999, who is, curiously enough, the brother of SCP-682. SCP-999 is known as the Orange Tickle Monster, a slimy boy with a happy expression and the power to cure crippling depression itself. It can ease and remedy the minds of people with mental health issues or that feel sad in general, but its most impressive showing was when it managed to subdue its brother SCP-682 and tickle it into submission. SCP-999 might seem harmless, and it is, but it is unironically one of the strongest SCPs in existence due to its high levels of potential. It might be labeled as safe, but in reality, it is a Thaumiel level SCP, as it is one of the very few weapons the Foundation can hope to use against higher dimensional beings like his father, the Scarlet King. Okay, so after researching a good amount, I believe that the strongest SCP in Series 1 is SCP-319. SCP-319 is a starborn, clock-like device made in the late 1800s with 2 components. 319-1 designates 12 mineral compartments that can power the mechanism depending on their position, and are enclosed in copper, brass, glass, and ass. Okay, no ass, but still. 319-2 is a small pocket dimension, or like a mini vacuum, with a lower energy value than our universe, which doesn't really mean much right now, but it will. Virtually any matter or energy that enters it from the outside gets annihilated due to the vastly different properties and physics at hand. SCP-319 stabilizes the vacuum, but due to outside movements and vibrations that are out of the SCP Foundation's control, even the smallest movements have caused it to expand. Any deviations in the position of any instance of SCP-319-1 by greater than 0.01% on any axis, or any change in size or position of SCP-319-2 by greater than 0.001% is deemed a potential ZK0 event. By the way, a ZK class scenario doesn't mean that only humanity, the Earth, the solar system, or our galaxy is straight up screwed. It actually means that everything in the universe is either destroyed, fundamentally changed, or broken. It's gone so big that in an undetermined number of years, it will escape its containment and bring our living universe down to its energy level while expanding at the speed of light. Meaning that it would engulf us and kill everything on Earth pretty much instantly, and it would reach the outer ends of the solar system all the way to the Oort cloud in less than 2 years. Chemistry and life as we know it would cease to exist and function. The space-time would still remain, but all of the matter within it would be destroyed. With SCP-319's expansion, very few things would live to tell the tale, amongst those being 682, 343, and 239. Granted, it would take billions of years for it to kill off everything in the universe, but here's why I think it's number 1. Not only does it have a high degree or range of destruction like with SCP-435-2, but like with SCP-94, its activation cannot be stopped or prevented by the Foundation. The rate of destruction is certainly quick, only overwhelmed by the vast size of the universe itself. So going off of that, I'd say it is the strongest in those regards. It's pretty evident too, as it is the only lethal, universal range ZK class SCP in Series 1. Anyways, that pretty much concludes the tour for the most dangerous SCPs within Series 1. The further that we go from here, the more dangerous and numerous the SCPs will become. I really hope that you guys enjoyed the video. Please be sure to support the artist and check out the articles in the description below, whom without their visuals and tales, the SCP verse wouldn't be as lively. Thanks a lot for watching, stay safe, and I'll catch you thotties next time. Peace out.